All right. Alan Guerrieri.
What to do?
A&M, Louisiana Lafayette.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about your journey growing up to where we are now.
Wow. Okay.
I want to hear it all.
Yeah. I grew up in College Station, Texas, which is where Texas A&M University is. That is where I ended up going to school. I played football there for 4 years. And then I transferred to Louisiana Lafayette. That is where that comes in. Utilized my 5th year, decided not to come back for my 6th year, which is just crazy that that's even a thing now. But yeah, played football for a while and then heard about the opportunity with Crowdsurf and I was immediately interested. But, you know, growing up, I was the son of a soccer coach. My dad is the women's soccer coach at Texas A&M University. And he's been there for now, 31 years. So you talk about a guy that brings it every single day and a guy I look up to every day. He's taught me so much and he's been a great coach and a great dad. And both of my parents have, my mom and my dad have been really great in raising me. So I have them to thank for that.
I love that. And you have one sister?
I have an older sister and a younger brother.
And a younger brother.
Mm-hmm.
That's
I'm the
awesome.
middle child.
I love that. What, you know, it was pretty funny how you ended up coming over full time, but I want to hear from your side of things. What was going through your mind with that whole situation?
Goodness, that was a whirlwind of about a week. So I was at the bowl game when I was at Louisiana Lafayette this past year, 2023, and I get a call from one of the guys that I played football with at Texas A&M. His name's Andrew Merrick, who is just, his reputation precedes him and everything. He needs absolutely no introduction. And he hits me up. It's like I'm between meetings. I'm going from my special teams meeting because I was a kicker and a punter. So I'm like between meetings and my phone is blowing up. I'm like, goodness gracious, like who is calling me right now? Like I don't have time to be like doing this right now. I'm about to go to practice or about to do all these things. And he's like, dude, I have to tell you about this opportunity. Like I've got this friend who's like looking to hire. And I'm like, okay, can we just like talk about it tomorrow? He's like, no. Like jump on the phone with him right now. Like he wants to interview you. And I was like, okay, that's sure. Fine. So I go down to the hotel lobby, find a relatively quiet space and just get to talking to you, who I had never met before. And you know, you start introducing me a little bit to what you're trying to do with Crowdsurf. And I was immediately intrigued by the idea of it. And I started thinking, I was like, okay, you know, like I am sort of trying to decide whether I'm going to come back for my 6th year, whether, you know, I see myself going to the NFL. So I sort of had to make that split second decision where I could have just been like, no, don't, like, I'm not interested, like, whatever, to being like, yeah, sure, I'll sit down, I'll talk, like, I'll hear what he has to say. And so I did that, and I'm so glad I did because it's brought me here. I've met some pretty great people here in Dallas. Had never moved outside of College Station before leaving for Louisiana. Only spent about 7 months there, and then now I'm back here in Dallas doing it and just
doing it.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, that was a whirlwind of a situation.
Yeah.
Andrew knew that we needed someone, the team needed someone that could fill a lot of different roles.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was interesting because like we're kind of looking, but not really. And I remember Andrew gives me the background on you, and he's like, no, he's great. It's like, sweet. Okay. So we hop on and call went really well. I was like, okay, like, I think a lot could line up with this. Like you were willing to move down here. You're still going to be doing school full time. And I was like, I can't commit to something long term just yet. Like we couldn't pigeon ourselves. And so I remember like we had one call, and after that, Andrew and I jump on. He's like, all right, so how'd it go? And I was like, man, I think it went really well. I want to think about it, and I got to talk with Stefan, because don't really make any decisions without Stefan. And I remember like you could, when Andrew gets fixated on something, he just wants the answer.
Yeah.
And so I remember we talked a tiny bit more, and then I was like, yeah, I like the fact that he could move here, and, a number of things. And I remember Andrew's phone just like goes dead. And so like he didn't hit me, and he calls me back like 30 minutes later. He's like, all right. He's like, Alan, he goes, all right, Alan's in. He's starting January 3rd and he's moving to Dallas.
Yeah. In the meantime, I'm just sitting there like thinking this is all coming from you. And I'm like, man, this guy moves fast.
Yeah.
But not knowing that probably in the background, he was just like saying that some date that he'd just come up with, like probably asked me, hey, when are you done with football? And I said, this date. And he's like, all right, next day you're coming to Dallas, right? And I'm like, sure, I guess.
And in my mind, I had made up, I was like, hey, this makes a lot of sense. Because I had told him, I was like, hey, him moving to Dallas coming January 3rd, like, I think what I anticipated was there was probably going to be one more call before. But I do love the fact that he moved that fast, And I think, I've told you, like, I think it's been a blessing. Like you came in, it's like we immediately kind of connected on the diet and working outside. I desperately needed that. I'm looking at the podcast with Jerry from November, and I've got the Goblin King chin going. And so it's an answer prayer.
It is a noticeable difference.
Yeah. Hey. Well, that's the Alan special right there.
Hey,
so
that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
But no, I'm incredibly thankful, and just like I think the energy that you've brought with work too, where you have a number of designated roles per se with social media manager, with some of the operations side, but I think just the ability to kind of bring the heat and just step in where it's needed, I think was like something that we were really missing. And, when I tend to like, I told you, I was like, hey, I tend to do a lot of my thinking immediately. And then that last 5%, I sit on it. And then the next thing I know, it's like, well, why have I not?
What happened to that idea?
Yeah. And I think one thing that I saw, or two things, was one, I was like, yeah, I like that. But like, let's do it Monday. And this is like first couple of weeks. And you're like, no, we're going to do it now. And I go, yes, we are.
Like, okay.
And then I remember we were working out, and like I was sitting there talking with Tim, and it'd gone like, a little talking's good, but then it goes over, and you're like, hey, are you gonna work out? Or are you just gonna keep talking? And I think those things, like, I really like those, because we come from the athlete world where it's like, hey, we're all in this together, but when it's time to lock down and be serious, it's like we shut everything off. And if we don't, which I can tend to do with a number of things sometimes, then I need to hear that, And I think that's like something really good that we're moving towards as a company, where a lot of it was, okay, we're figuring it out. We're trying to figure out what's going on, how we operate, what's going on. But now we're getting structures in place, and there's accountability with that, like where is this, Preston? Yeah. Why is this not here? And I'm like, oh, well, get it done, and I think like that type, that I think that's the kind of environment we're trying to create at the company, and a lot of which you've brought, to be honest, so incredibly thankful for that. Yeah. It's been, what are we? We're 3.5 months in so far. Right.
Almost 4 months. That would be like May, like 3rd or 4th.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure when I started, but yeah, it's been a really cool experience, because I've always wanted to work in the startup world, because I myself am very entrepreneurship minded, and actually have kind of a funny story about like when I was younger and my sort of like start and all that stuff is, I mean, it's pretty, it goes back to me. I would ride my bike to school every day, and I was kind of like the weird like soccer kid because I didn't grow up playing really many other sports other than soccer. And so I had my other friend who was on my soccer team, and we'd ride our bikes to school every single day. And this was 5th and 6th grade. So this is, I'm not sure if you guys had intermediate school, but that's in College Station. That's what we did. And so we'd go and we'd pass by this gas station every single day. And right during that time was whenever all these crazy like energy drinks like started coming out, because it was getting past the Red Bulls and Monsters and getting into like other companies started dropping their products and stuff. And so we'd show up to the school like breakfast time, basically whenever everybody's getting dropped off. It's like probably 30 to 45 minutes. And we started to see that like every time that we would bring like an energy drink or whatever, just because like we didn't really need it. We were like 13. Mm-hmm. And so we'd bring it. People were immediately interested. And so I'm like, okay, I just sold that kid my Monster or whatever I brought for that day for $10, and I bought it for like $3. And I'm like, I could start like the light bulb went off. And so I like immediately I had like $200 in my savings account, and my parents have no idea that I ever did this, by the way. But I'd show up to school with like 20 of these things. That's funny. And I just scaled it, and I was just like, I'm going to come in and absolutely rip everybody off in there. And like, obviously no parents knew their kids were doing this because, you know, parents don't want their kids drinking energy drinks that young. And so I'm sure my teachers just hated me. But yeah, I mean, it got my mind thinking in that business sense. Like, you see a need, you fill the need, and then you learn how to make it better, how to change it up. And ever since that, I was just addicted to it. I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to start something. I don't want to rip people off like I was doing, but you know, that part I felt a little bit bad about. But it was a cool way. And it got like, I told one of my teachers about it, and he was like, dude, he's like, you're a little businessman, aren't you? And I was like, yeah, I love not that. On purpose.
Yeah. And then you started selling cocaine after that, right?
Yeah. Then I went into drugs. No, did not. I did not ever do that.
That's a cool. How old were you then?
12.
Yeah,
that would have been cool. 2013. Yeah,
that's cool. Yeah, that's interesting hearing like those types of stories. You know, there's a kid in my small group that like basically buys candy and crayons in like massive bulk. And then the crayons, he gets these like massive packs, and then he melts them down and puts them in those like shapes. And so like he'll sell these like dinosaur or like Optimus Prime or I don't know what they are. Yeah. But he sells these like crayons that cost nothing and these like really interesting, cool things. And then like he's taken that cash, and then he goes and buys trading cards. And I'm just like, I'm just like,
you're like, who in the world would buy that?
Yeah. I'm like, can I invest in you?
Yeah. Literally. Like, can
we got a platform.
Yeah. I mean, seriously,
you need to waive the age limit, but we'll bet on you.
Yeah. I mean, in the future, maybe we keep an eye out to do a deal with them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's
kindergarten.
It goes back to the whole Crowdsurf thesis of investing in a single person.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really cool idea. I think that there is so much, because you look at people like that and you're like, okay, that's a guy that I don't know what he's going to do, but his brain is thinking in the right way. And you're like, I don't know how I'm going to get a piece of that. I don't know how, like if I'm going to hire him one day, because you hear people talk about, they're like, oh yeah, that kid's going places or whatever. And it's like, never has there been really a way, other than if you're going to hire them to work for you or something like that, there's never been a way to just be like, hey, I believe in you. Here's
money.
My belief in the form of dollars. Go like do whatever. Like, I don't even care. Like, I'm trusting you to go and figure it out.
So true. I think we're obviously starting with creators because they have a number of different revenue streams. They have distribution through their socials. But in reality, it's so true. Just this idea of investing in individuals, there are so many talented individuals that are at a job, maybe saving money to go out on their own, and they're there for a number of years working a normal job, kind of waiting until they can go do their own thing. Mm-hmm. And the idea is like, okay, well, if we could find those individuals and flood them with cash, enough cash to go out on their own and live comfortably, build whatever is needed, just align everyone with everything that you're going to do. Mm-hmm. And then you set a minimum that they have to make each year before they give up anything.
Right.
And that's to protect them. And then you kind of align with 5% over ideally their kind of career, a 30-year time period per se. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's a really interesting model when you think of kind of how it works where, investing in someone who's going to go build companies is a tiny bit different, but the idea for both is the individual signs an agreement where they pledge everything that they want to do over that time period, or anything that they're going to do over that time period to an entity.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, when you have that pledge, then you can raise money on top of that with the idea that, hey, I truly am investing in that individual and their financial output over that time. And so it's a really like wild concept. And
it's crazy.
And I've started to like ask people, I'm like, okay, regardless of creator, builder, just any individual, hey, someone comes to you right now with a blank check. What's the minimum you would take in exchange for 5% of your financial output over your career? Mm-hmm. And it's a fascinating question. I mean, like,
it's basically asking someone.
I have a number.
Yeah.
Like,
well, what's your number?
Well, I think it depends on the Crowdsurf side. Right. But I think, man, if someone came to me right now with $500,000, like I would think hard about it.
For 5%.
For
5% of everything over the next 30 years, or everything?
Yeah, over the next 30 years. That means I have to make 10 million.
Right. So
for investors to break even.
Yeah.
Which theoretically means I need to do multiples of that for it to be worth it to others. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a lot of caveats to that because I think that we could raise that amount of money on the Crowdsurf side. Mm-hmm. And so I would probably forego that right now with the intention of, hey, raising at the Crowdsurf level. Mm-hmm. But if I couldn't get outside capital at the Crowdsurf level, heck yeah. Like, I believe it. I believe that, just that company itself could exponentially do that amount. So there's a lot of things with it, but like.
It is a kind of a crazy question to go just like ask people, because until they realize A, what we're trying to do, mm-hmm. B, like how we're doing it, just asking them straight up, basically, do you think you're going to be ultra successful in life? Mm-hmm. And do you think you're going to make that what the top 1% in the country make? Mm-hmm. And it's like a lot of people sort of underestimate themselves, and they're sort of in this mindset of, well, maybe one day, but it's very few people have that plan of how they're going to go about it. And I'm not saying that you need to be, sit here and tell me how you're going to make millions of dollars over the next 30 years, because, that's like looking into a crystal ball. But if you have displayed this sort of, blueprint that you can sort of follow, like some of these people that, we're meeting that, like in that Miami trip that Crowdsurf went on about a month ago, some of those people, just the way they think and the way they operate, they're not just thinking about right now. They're thinking about how they're going to be, still relevant and still around 10, 20, 30 years from now. And it's just really, really exciting to be around this kind of people. But it's also like if you were to ask one of them what they thought, they're going to give you an answer that is probably more than they're going to actually make. But and this could be an interesting thing that we go around asking people and like start of, one of those cool like reel series or whatever on is what do you think that you could make in the next 30 years if someone, handed you a blank check? What would you want right now to go and raise? And then, like, where do you value yourself?
Yeah.
Because you asked me this the other day and I was just like, I don't even know. I don't even have the first clue to answer that question. But if I had to throw out a number, I think I said 250,000 for 5%.
Over 30 years?
Yeah, over 30 years. Like, do I think I can make $5 million? I think so.
Yeah.
Over 30 years, sure.
Well, because the interesting thing too, as the investor with, let's say that deal, let's say your intention was to, maybe it was, hey, I'm going to take the deal. I'm going to continue rocking with Crowdsurf with the intention of then that launching me into my next thing.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about when someone on the investor side investing in you is you're really kind of expediting that individual's ability to get in the game in a meaningful way. Where it's like, hey, that 250, that may go quick. Now that may go over a number of years, but it's going to allow you to then go start something, which then accelerates your learning curve, which then that much more quickly gets you into the game, because probabilities say that one's not going to work. The first one's not going to work. But the individuals that keep going at it, all you need generally is one. And so it's interesting to think on the individual level, setting aside the creator side, it's just like you're giving that you're giving that individual the ability to get in the game in a meaningful way and take risk that they weren't otherwise able to.
Right.
Which then accelerates things, and maybe the first one doesn't work, and probabilities say the first one doesn't work, but maybe the second one does, maybe the third one does.
The stuff you learn from that is, you can't put a price on that.
And the cool thing is that during that time period, because of that minimum revenue threshold that you have to hit each year before you give up anything, your life doesn't look any different. So you take in a large sum of cash and have a chance at going big. You don't give up anything, if your revenue drops, which you wouldn't have much, you would be living off that. But, even if you were to go work somewhere else, but you're in the game, And so I think when all of a sudden you translate that to the creator side, where these individuals are small businesses that have historically not had access to capital. With that, there are a lot of nuances about an individual raising money. And it hasn't been possible until now. And so with that, if you allow that individual to basically tie everything they're currently doing, as well as whatever they're going to do over a 10 to 30 year time period, you then allow them to take in capital where investors are betting on them as an individual, investing in them as an individual, their platform revenue, their brand deals, their merch revenue, companies they create, if they're given equity in a company, basically everything. If investors can guarantee that they're aligned for the Logan Paul scenario, for the Mr. Beast scenario, then the amount that can be funded and given to those creators is massive. And so that's like pretty interesting. And I think it is cool to see the types of creators that we're talking to right now where they don't have access. 2 of them are music based. Both of them have label deals on the table, but both of them have the clear creative direction. And they're like, hey, I don't need to give up all control. I don't need to have someone come in and tell me what to do. Like, I would rather take, similar amount of cash and give up 5% over my entire career rather than give up that amount for the cash, but give up 80% of what I do over the next 5 years, 7 years, And that's even with that, it's not including companies that are created, and there's a lot of revenue streams that aren't created. And so you're just seeing this interesting move towards when all of a sudden the majority of people are online and these individuals have social media, they can build whatever they want dang near overnight, and you have a number of different revenue streams that are coming in.
Yeah.
And if all of a sudden you can tie those together and people know that they're investing in not only that, but whatever else the individual does, the amount that they can get is exponentially more.
Yeah.
So
it's a really exciting sort of new structure that I think more people, as they hear more about it, it'll sort of, it may not make sense the first time, but once they see that first person and you always have those people that are always a little bit more ahead of the curve and sort of see a great opportunity for what it is, but are sort of afraid because no one else is doing it quite yet. That it's like, well, I don't know. But, as soon as you see that first thing work out and it's like, okay, this is a legit model for not only me as a investor that just is like a fan of this person, but also someone who is looking for an alternative type of investment that maybe is a little bit more risky, but in the Logan Paul scenario, in the Mr. Beast scenario, it's like, wow, this is really cool
return
and just an outstanding return that, really isn't found many other places.
Yeah.
But the thing that because we talked about my origin story, but I kind of want to hear, because you sort of started this and since I've been here for the last 3 months, I've started to hear more and more about how you grew up and whatever. And, there was a great podcast that you did with the NIL podcast with Grayson. And that was cool to hear how you started with, your basketball career, and then how it quickly turned from that to doing, going down a path of just a dark path.
Yeah.
Something that away from, Christ, and that just wasn't very, that something just you weren't very proud of. And it seems like now you've started this company where you're trying to do the right thing. And, I sort of noticed when we were in Miami and in these places that we've gone for some of these trips, it's like, yes, these places are not, they're not really a lot of people here that see the world that, that Christ wants us to see things by.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, it's sort of sad, but it's also it's really cool to see some of these creators that we talk to that maybe, hadn't come from a background like we did, that, we grew up in church, grew up with both of our parents. We're, I maybe didn't grow up with as many opportunities as you did. But I still had a great opportunity. My parents helped me out paying for school. It was nothing in my life was given to me, which is the same as you. But, maybe we didn't really have to search very far for Christ. And, I think it's really cool. So kind of speak on A, what you're trying to do there, and then B, how you got there from your basketball career and being sort of raised that way.
Yeah, definitely. I think number one, it's we were created and put on this earth for a reason. And I think I lived the majority of my life not thinking that. I think from an early age, I was introduced to faith, and I would have called myself a Christian, but my entire life, my actions in no way, shape, or form showed it. I was a disaster. I lived for me. I partied a lot, went out a bunch, was unfaithful in relationships. I think you name it, that's kind of what I did, and I think with that, my entire life I played basketball. And so I think a lot of that was my North Star. That really was, okay, I'm doing this. I'm maybe not making the grades that I want to,
but I'm pretty good at basketball. Yeah.
I'm doing this or I act this type of way, but basketball. And I think basketball enabled a lot of it. And I didn't even really realize that. And so from an early age, got on a really good team with Julius Randle, who was number 1 in the country from whenever they start rankings in first grade all the way through going to college. And so all it takes with someone like that is a couple good games and you got a shot, you know? And so I got all these looks that I wouldn't have otherwise gotten.
Yeah.
And
6 foot with some handles, man. You can.
Hey, yeah, 6 foot is generous too. I think 5'11", white. I could shoot though.
Yeah.
I will say I could shoot. Mm-hmm. I was a liability on defense. I was a pretty good help defender. Okay. Like I wouldn't, like if there was a serious like 6'2" point guard, like, with some size, like we could have some problems. Like, I mean, but like,
hey, it's good to know yourself.
But if they had a smaller point guard who wasn't crazy physical, I was pretty good with that. And then I was a good help defender. So I could hit those little like, fakes like that to where someone wouldn't go. I'd be interested to hear what my teammates had to say about that, but that was my view. I could shoot. I was a momentum player, so if I got going, like we could really go, but like I could easily be the worst player on the court if I had the momentum going the opposite way.
Right.
But okay. So backing up, played all the way through, started getting a bunch of injuries, my sophomore year of high school. Basically was playing the best I ever had. Coaches said, hey, you're a tournament away from 10 offers, come back early from something, go to my high school summer league game and just like obliterate my ankle like a month before the biggest tournament. So that was, that's awesome.
Always good.
Yeah. So come back. We have one game leading up. It's a full game. Third play of the game, guys driving, coming down to hand the ball off to me. His defender pushes him into me. I explode my lip. Like I'm like all over the court. So I got to sit out and then I go and I can't move and I'm just tough time.
Yeah.
Tear my shoulder junior year. So I had a bunch of shoulder tape, have to play with that during that time. And so everyone I talked to, hey, if you sign me, I've got to get surgery right after. For some reason, Penn took a chance. Turned out to be kind of the worst chance they took, because I immediately got up there and tore my hip, had surgery, came back for sophomore year. 2 days before I head back up, tear my other hip, get the MRI. They say, hey, it's, your hip, you're looking at a potential hip replacement regardless. If you keep playing, it'll expedite it. And so at that time I was like, hey, I'm not going to play anymore. I don't even like this anymore. And so all of a sudden my North Star that I justified everything from is gone. And so I'm sitting in this weird place in college, and sophomore year is kind of just weird. Junior year partying picks up pretty heavy. Going into senior year, meet a girl. We start dating. This is start of second semester, senior year. January 2017. Awesome girl here in Dallas. I got nothing but love for her and her family, still friends. Pretty quickly, I think I'm like, I'm going to marry this girl. I tell my entire family, everyone I've ever talked to, I'm like, I'm going to marry this girl. We're super serious, carry on. She ends up breaking up with me. And she's just like, hey, Preston, you say that you want to be successful, yet you're not working towards anything. You say that you're a believer, yet your actions in no way, shape, or form show it. You say a number of these things, yet there's no action behind it. And I don't want to be a part of this, was a general kind of gist. And so that was October 13th, 2017.
Yeah.
And at that time, I was stopping kind of everything I was doing for her.
What was the day?
October 13th, 2017.
Wow.
Friday the 13th.
Man.
So I, at that point, come home devastated, and I dive back into everything. Mm-hmm. Drugs, the whole thing. And I remember it's Thanksgiving of 2017 and I'm obliterated by myself at my parents' house upstairs watching a movie, just me. And I remember thinking, man, I'm about as gone as could be, but I want more. Mm-hmm. And so like, what else can I do? Like, and I remember just this weird feeling as I was going to bed, and the next morning I wake up and I'm sitting there and I'm just like, I remember walking into the mirror and I'm like looking myself in the mirror, just like feeling horribly, like physically, mentally, emotionally, like I had searched for a lot of things, through a lot of things that this world says brings happiness and I was empty. Mm-hmm. The girl that was holding everything together that I thought I was going to marry basically just tore down everything that I thought I had. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting here lost. Mm-hmm. And I remember for the first time in a long time, I opened up a Bible and I read Proverbs 2. And verse 3 stood out and it says, cry out for insight and ask for understanding. And I remember that was the first time I had ever read that like that. And I grew up in the church and, I had lived in a way that my parents didn't know. My parents taught us differently.
Right.
My parents taught us where truth was found. Mm-hmm. I just didn't listen.
Yeah.
And I think at that point I saw this, cry out for insight and ask for understanding. And that was the first time it hit me. And I remember sitting there and I was walking back into my bathroom or out from my bathroom. I remember I'm in between my room and my bathroom, in between like where the door is. Okay. And I remember just standing there like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay. Like what? I have not lived for anything my entire life.
Wow.
And I remember I was like, all right, Lord, I don't know what this means, what this looks like just yet, but I'm crying out to you today. And I was like, I know that the two things that I can do are start reading this book again and working out. Mm-hmm. And I felt like I'm sitting here right here, just talking to him.
Yeah.
And I was like, to be honest, I don't want to do either of those, mm-hmm. but I'm going to. And I pray that you'll show me the way. And I'm like crying out to you as I sit here in probably my most broken place I've ever been. Mm-hmm. And man, it was a journey. I threw everything away at that time. And I was like, all right, it's got to start today.
Yeah.
And I remember I walked down into the workout room and my dad, 70 years old at the time. Mm-hmm. And he's on the treadmill or on the elliptical at like 40 minutes, like just drenched in sweat, mm-hmm. like basically like in a way talking to himself to keep motivating. And I'm like,
that's pretty intense.
I'm like, my goodness. Okay. Like I can do this.
Yeah.
I can
my
do this.
My 7-year-old dad can do this. I can do this. Yeah.
Like I'm part him, uh-huh. And I remember getting on the treadmill and I turned on, purple Lamborghini.
Oh,
for 36 minutes straight on repeat.
Wow.
Clean version.
Okay.
We'll add that in there. Purple Lamborghini on repeat and ran 3.5 miles.
Wow.
And I was like, I think
that would drive me insane listening to the same purple Lamborghini.
Hey,
but
listen, you get pushed to that low.
Hey, I luckily never been there. But
you ever get pushed to that low, you got to turn on purple Lamborghini, mm-hmm. clean version, and go on repeat, and that'll get you through it.
I'll keep that in the back of my mind, but I hope I never have to have to go there.
Yeah, just in case. In case. But that was the day. It was the day after Thanksgiving of 2017, and I think. A couple of things that continued growing in, I think one is like one of the biggest things that continued to further me is this idea of accountability and bringing community in. Mm-hmm. It's like if we want to go do something, if we want to achieve something or if we want to stop something, like we need to bring other individuals in and let them fully in.
Yeah.
And that's even something that I'm still going through right now. You know, it's like naturally, if I want to go do something or stop something, especially us as men, we're like, well, let's just will ourselves there. And that doesn't work. You know, it can sometimes, but I think like that's one of the biggest things that I've learned. It's like, hey, bringing accountability and community and other guys in and being fully known and fully loved and fully understood. So often or not, we have things that we keep inside where we're like, hey, I'm going to voice everything else, but like, I'm going to keep that one in and I'll figure it out myself.
Yeah.
You know, hey, you know, I'm trying to get here, but like, I'll keep it myself. Like, I, you know, if I, you know, and it's like,
because you're almost afraid if you tell someone this and then you don't follow up on it, they're like, well, you just failed.
100%.
You know? And I think a lot of people are scared of failure, but continue on that.
No. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly it. Like, I think it's like, we think, oh, well, I'm showing weakness if I'm telling others that that I'm doing this and I want to stop.
Yeah.
Or, well, what if I don't, you know, to the inverse, I want to go achieve something. Well, what if I don't? And that both of those happen, you know, I think, but that's a big thing, I think, is bringing accountability and community in.
Yeah.
You know, and I think another thing that I've realized with myself over the last year, is like a sense of pride with certain things where I have no problem talking about the past as long as I feel like it's the past.
Right.
So like for a long time, and even still some now with Crowdsurf, there were just times it's like, we have no idea what we're doing. And I would almost like wait to tell people until I had whatever it was figured out.
Yeah.
And I realized that was pride because I wanted to show people that I quote unquote had things together. When in reality, it's like, one, that's not relatable because we all have things we're going through. But two, it's like people can help, you know? And so I think one thing I've tried to go is like swing a little bit to the opposite side where it's like, I have no problem talking about anything and everything that's going on right now. And like what I'm currently struggling with, you know, where we're trying to go. Like I'm trying to get there, you know, it doesn't mean it always happens.
And what are some things that you're currently, I mean, if we're getting them out there and, you know, you don't care that people know them, like what are some things right now that you're kind of struggling with that you want to be like, these are the things I'm working on. These are the things that I think I can get better at. Like you have the things now, like, of course you're not using, you're not, you know, going out. I mean, I can vouch for you. I don't think I've seen you go out to a club or nightclub in the time I've been here, at least. So, you know, what are some things right now that you're working on and have set, you know, what does your community look like? What is your sort of way that you go about doing that?
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing I'm working on is I think with so much going on the work front, you know, and sometimes not moving at the speed I want to move at, I can get negative on myself. And I can say, you know what, Preston, like, man, if someone else was in this situation, like they would have done that. And it's like, man, Preston, like you suck at this, you know, and you almost like talk down to yourself.
Yeah.
And in reality, it's like, okay, like maybe there's some truth in those things, but rather than viewing it and being hard on myself, I should view it as like, okay, I'm not moving as quick as I am or as I should. How do we get that in place?
Right.
You know? And it's like, instead of being hard on myself, it's like understanding that we're all working towards something better and trying to put a process in place to be better in that. And so I think that's one. And then I think like, you know, on the community side, and I think it's just like trying to be fully known with people. You know, it's like trying not to silo certain things. Like we all have struggles, but it's like I don't want to silo certain things that are happening or going on. And so I think it just comes back to this like, hey, am I fully known with others? You know, is everything that I'm currently doing, you know, there shouldn't be any restrictions necessarily, but everyone should know what I'm doing. You know, like I try and live in that. I don't always, obviously.
Of course.
But I think that's, you know, a big thing. And I think like that's a way I try and like lead on the company side as well. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, I spend most of my day with you. And so like, I try and be open. I'm like, I think the first week I told you, I was like, man, hey, you know, get ready. Like these are the list of things that I struggle with. So you better figure out how to help me here.
Yeah.
You know?
It's like, geez, okay. No, but I think that, something that you said earlier that kind of stuck out to me is someone who went through, and this is totally different than sort of what you struggle with, but I think something that you do well is you're very upfront with people. Like you just said, you're very upfront with me when I first walked in that these are the things I don't do well. And I think an example of what you were saying, an example of you putting it out there, like was when you were going through your recruiting process and you're like, hey, by the way, I mean, I know I could probably come in and do well for your school, whatever, but I'm gonna have to come in and do the surgery. Like, and a lot of, you know, as a coach's son, someone says that to your dad, who's a coach, he's gonna think that, and he's gonna be like, well, there's another person at their same level. I'm gonna take the other person just because inherently it's less risk. Yep. Or maybe you're more talented than someone. And like you putting that out in the open says a lot about your character and how you were raised. Probably had a big part to do with that. Because, you know, when you don't put things out in the light for people to just know, and you sometimes wait to tell them until later, you're almost doing, you're doing both of yourselves a disservice, but you're doing more to them a disservice. Because now, do they resent you a little bit more for not telling them, hey, I'm going to have to do this shoulder surgery or whatever it was? And it's like, that's just something that we've tried to bring into Crowdsurf with saying up front, like, hey, by the way, this may be a problem for you, whatever it is. You know, some people, you know, have different opinions of what, you know, problems that could 100%. Be faced. But it kind of goes back to just trying to do things the right way. And of course we're going to mess up. Of course we're going to, you know, have things we struggle with and, you know, try to correct them. But it's going with that mindset of like, I want to tell people these are my faults. This is what I normally do. Correct me. Yeah. You know, and 100%. being coachable, you know? Yeah. So I think that's a pretty cool thing to hear and sort of makes sense as to why we're doing that now at Crowdsurf and it, you know, 100%. We'll see where it goes. Yeah. So we've talked about a number of different things. Talk to me about sort of the origin story of how your personal life and this life in business and how sort of this new life and this new business that you're trying to start, like how did that come to be, and sort of walk us through like the idea of it, you know, how you first got your, you know, how you hired your first employee, how you know, have gone through these different things that as a first time entrepreneur and as a first time business creator and leader, like what are some things that you've learned, and B, you know, highlight some of those that timeline that you've kind of gotten to
yeah. So on the timeline side, you know, I graduated summer 2017, and I went and worked at a startup bank here in Dallas, Maple Mark Bank. Awesome group of people. Was one of the two analysts. We had another analyst who had done it for a number of years somewhere else, and I came in right out of college, just absolutely clueless. Awesome group. Was there about a year and a half. From there, I went to an investment fund, kind of family office here in Dallas. And while I was there, like they had a number of investments in the kind of gambling space. They looked at some of the gaming, and then I think there was there's a lot of intersection with entertainment. And so naturally I kind of liked and gravitated towards that side. And I saw that when I worked on one kind of industry deep dive, like I found a lot of life there. When I had to do kind of a bunch of different spaces and public and private, I kind of struggled a little bit. And so did a massive amount of work on the gaming industry and saw that a lot of power was flowing towards these video game streamers that were almost game agnostic, that kind of sat on top of the entire ecosystem. Around that same time, led the angel round in a company called Commonwealth, which does fractional ownership of racehorses and now funding golfers, tennis players, and more traditional athletes as well. So we led the angel round in that company. And at that same time, kind of the thought in my mind was, well, what if we take this same concept, except apply it to creators? And so from that, broke off and started that and kind of led us down this journey, starting with, okay, we could fund video game streamers. But in reality, I think as we continued to walk down that path, like this entire ecosystem of just these individual creators became known. And so we did two things. One, we ended up creating a structure that gives an individual the ability to raise money like a company, where they point everything they're currently doing as well as whatever they're going to do for a set period of time to an entity, which is entitled to, a percentage that you can then raise from the crowd or raise money from anyone. And then the second is we got what's called a Reg CF funding portal license, which gives us the ability to raise up to $5 million per creator for as many creators as we want a year, all in $50 share increments, unaccredited investors, credit, debit, ACH. And so that's kind of the start from that. And now we're at a place where we're set to launch. We did a closed beta offering, a while ago to test some of the legal, a regulated offering through our platform. Did that. And then now we're set to launch to the public. First creator set to launch here in the next week or so. And so from there, it's like we have the number of creators after them, but we're excited. I mean, I think we've really like hyper-focused and consolidated down towards this idea of long-term deals for the creators, large amount of cash, like 5% or less of their financial output over their career. So we're excited. We're right there. Yeah. And it's time to launch.
Framework's in place.
Framework's in place.
To, see where, how sticky it is and how people respond to it. So
exactly.
That's, a daunting task, but at least you've gotten the framework in mind, like created to go out and have the ability to just do it, you know, and not 100%. And not have to worry about, well, we didn't think of this part. I think part of the blessing in disguise of, because some people think like, oh, so you're not the first to do this. Like Commonwealth is the first idea. It's like, sure, we sort of borrowed that idea and like reshaped it and packaged it as our own. But we also got to see, like how people responded to that. And, they've had a lot of success and we're trying to mirror that sort of success. And, but it's also learning, okay, what didn't work? What did work? And because it's so similar, it's like, okay, you've been able to look at that from a distance, but also from a close, a close sort of viewpoint and been like, okay, this is what I need to do. So what were some of the things that you saw and you've seen these past couple of years as you've been building the framework? What are some things that you wanted to do? And then how did you go about doing that stuff?
Yeah. I mean, I think one interesting thing that we saw along the way was there was a a company that raised like $70 million to do kind of what we're doing, fractionalizing ownership to songs, to master royalties. And that was what our first kind of closed beta offering was actually fractionalizing the ownership to the master royalties of a song. That was insane to do because there's the IP, there's multiple components to a song. It was really good, knowledge to have. Yeah, it was. But that company that raised that amount, they were going the unregulated route. And so that was part of the reason we kind of pushed towards that, because I think I saw, man, this company goes and raises $70 million. Like, maybe there is really something here. Mm-hmm. And so we did that. After we did that first one, I completely moved away from, I was like, I do not think that will ever work at the retail level, $50 share levels, completely moving away. And so I think from there, we hyper-focused long-term deals with creators where they get to raise sometimes multiples of their current revenue in exchange for a small percent. And you take a long time period to account for anything that could happen. And then you play the winners, understanding majority won't be winners.
Right.
That was kind of an interesting thing that we saw early with that other company. And I think since then, we've continued to be kind of hyper-focused on that space. But I think the other interesting thing is now that we have a number of big creators in our network that aren't necessarily going to raise money, but could come in on the investment side or could be almost like advisors to these small creators where you tie them in the economics and they blow them up, And so I think that's another interesting thing. It's like when all of a sudden you have an individual and they fractionalize the ownership to their career. And then you have thousands of people invest in that. Well, the moment the deal's funded, we're going to send the cap table, which is, the ownership of that, to the creator, who then has their name, email, number of all people who are aligned with them for the next 30 years. Yeah. Once the rules of the game are verified that, hey, you're truly investing in everything this individual does, there's nothing that gets past it, and they're protected, then will a lot of big time people, big time creators start investing good money into this with the idea of immediately bringing them under their umbrella and helping them 2x, 3x, 4x their revenue dang near overnight from a post. Yeah. Or, hey, come learn or come under my infrastructure. We already do this for a number of creators, for myself. Come take a step into this, and you immediately bring these smaller creators underneath your umbrella. Like, that's a really interesting
That's sort of something that hasn't really been like thought too much upon, and I really don't think that it's been done anywhere.
No.
But it would be interesting to see if that sort of model would be something that these, small time creators would be interested in doing, because the big time creators have said, they're like, this is interesting. This is interesting that we sort of are looking to do something like this. But it's finding those people. I think that's the hard part of that, is finding the small creator that has the ability to learn and, absorb everything this person that has been there and done it, and obviously has shown that they're capable of performing at that high of a level, and always thinking almost 2 or 3 steps ahead.
Yep.
In terms of like, okay, this is how I display myself away from the camera, and this is how I think of new things that I want to do in the future. And it's like, these are the things that the big creator would teach them, but it's also the small creator has to have that ability to, hold all that information. And I think finding that would be sort of the harder part. But I think that by bringing in those bigger creators, that maybe sometimes they already have people in mind that they know.
100%.
And it's like, you'll never know until you try it out and see how it goes. And, if people are
rock from there.
Yeah, exactly. So that's an exciting new form this could take. But
yeah, it's about to get wild.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of exciting avenues that it could go, but I think focusing on the main thing and keeping the main thing is what will really drive our success.
100%.
I'm excited to really just spread the word about Crowdsurf, and
Me too.
It'll be exciting.
I love it. I think that was really good.
That was
good
fire.
stuff. Yeah, that was good stuff.